So as I was saying, I'm Ryan Brown. I have about 20 years of experience in coffee, most of that focused on cupping and green buying. And I also wrote Dear Coffee Buyer, a book focused on the role of buying coffee. And this is Facsimile. Facsimile, if you have Facsimile coffees in front of you ready to cup, that's fantastic. Very excited to have you here. We're really excited to taste these with you. If you are watching this and you don't have Facsimile coffees in front of you, I'm really excited to help you learn more about tasting coffee. And I can tell you that you'll also learn a lot more about tasting coffee if you subscribe to Facsimile so that you have the same coffees in front of you, while we're tasting them together. We are going to walk through all of the steps of setting up a cupping, as well as how I evaluate coffees that I'm cupping. And we're going to talk about the various parts of it, and we're going to talk about all the equipment you need and all of that. Scott is our first guest. I'm very excited to have Scott as both my co-collaborator and our first guest at Facsimile. Scott, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. My name's Scott Rao. I've been in coffee about 26 years as a cafe owner and roaster, and more recently a consultant. I've written several books about coffee brewing and roasting, and I'm excited to offer these coffees to you and share these coffees with you. And also, I'm excited to learn from Ryan. I've cupped with Ryan many times over the last 15 years, and every time I cup with him, I learn something. And I'm happy to both be a guest and a collaborator, but also to be a student for Ryan here. So yeah, let's do this.
You're a good student, Scott.
Thank you.
It's worth noting that this Facsimile is a different subscription because it's a cupping subscription for serious coffee enthusiasts. And specifically, what we want to do, our goal is to help you improve your coffee tasting skills, calibrate your scores with myself and other experts, and gain insights about origins, processing, and samples. So that's what we're going to do today, and that's what we're going to do in future cuppings as well. We have some really excited guests slated, some exciting coffees slated, and I'm excited to cup those with you.
Okay, Ryan's very excited.
Yeah, I'm extremely excited. So let's talk about equipment. So the first thing is water. And I'm going to get my water started right now because the water takes a little bit of time to warm up. And the last thing that you want is to be waiting for your water as you're cupping. So I am using third wave water. Scott, can you tell me a little bit more about third wave water?
Yeah, I'm using third wave water as well. We recommend for this cupping that you use something like third wave water or barista hustle water. Both are ways of adding minerals to distilled water to get what we consider sort of ideal mineral ratios for making coffee. But it's perfectly okay to use any water that's not extremely soft or extremely hard that tastes good. So there are some bottled waters out there that work. You might be lucky to live in a place where carbon filtered tap water will work well. Don't sweat the water too much. If you want to be picky, using something like the third wave water barista hustle is great. Otherwise, any reasonable water for coffee making is fine. If you have questions about anything like that, feel free to send us a message after our video. For the next month's subscription, we're happy to talk about things like grinders, water, etc.
Perfect. So the other equipment that I have, we have 4 samples. So naturally I have 5 cupping bowls. The extra cupping bowl is for both weighing, just to keep one bowl tared on my scale, and also to rotate through as I'm grinding. I have a gram scale, speaking of, with a precision of 1/10 of a gram. I have a couple of cupping spoons. I'll use one of them for most of the cupping and the other one for part of the cupping. Something to spit into. I've got a bucket off camera. You don't need to see that for dumping excess spit into. And a couple of rinse cups, as well as a timer that I have set to count up so that we know when to do certain things in the cupping, including breaking the crusts that form on the coffees as we're brewing them, and also kind of when we want to go in and taste the coffees as they cool. So the recipe that we're going to use today is 1 gram of coffee per 17 grams of water. In these barista hustle cupping bowls, I like to put about exactly 10 grams of coffee per 170 grams of water. So I'm going to go ahead and measure 10 grams of each of these samples into.
Okay. I've got the same bowls, so I'm doing 10 to 170. For people at home, maybe you have some cupping bowls, maybe you don't. That's not important. All that matters is you have some sort of reasonably sized vessel. And even if all of your cups are not the same exact size or shape, that's okay too. What is important is everything in cupping is that you treat every bowl the same. If you're using 10 to 170, use 10 to 170 in every cup. If you're grinding on a certain setting, grind every coffee on the same setting. That's the most important thing in cupping. It's not about the specifics. It's about being perfectly consistent with whatever variables you choose.
I'm ordering my samples 1 to 4 left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is the way that we'll discuss these samples throughout this cupping. And Scott, how are we going to grind these?
Oh, right. So I'm going to talk about grinding a few different ways, depending on your reference point. So if you, so like I have a Baratza Forte, I'm going to grind on setting number 4A. If you have a commercial grinder, like a Ditting or an EK, grind on a setting like number 4 or number 5. What that looks like to someone who doesn't have one of these grinders is something between the size of kosher salt crystals and something like sugar in the raw crystals. If you are an uber geek, like my friend Jonathan texted me this morning and said, hey, what size grind should I use for the cupping today? And then he actually does particle size distribution analysis. So I was like, oh, between 400 and 500 microns. And he was like, okay, great, thank you. Most important, just like with the bowls and the weighing and everything else, is use the same grind for every coffee. It's not about getting the perfect grind setting. Like, I'm sure that Ryan's grind setting is slightly different than mine because we have different grinders. What is important is that you choose a reasonable grind setting. Reasonable would be something like a little finer than you would use for a pour over, but much coarser than you would use for espresso. If you're in that window, you're good. That's perfect. Not a problem at all. Don't sweat the details with that stuff. We are happy to, 80-20 everything in a sense in cupping, right? So like, if your cupping grind seems reasonable, that's perfect. Don't worry about anything else.
Perfect. Yeah, great.
Okay.
So Scott, are you ready to grind these?
I am.
Okay, so I'm going to take a few beans of each sample and I'm going to grind it and just throw it away. And it's just a means of making sure that there's no leftover grounds from previous samples that I've ground through this grinder. So I'm going to grind those into this chamber that I'm not going to keep, and then I'm going to take my extra cupping bowl and I'm going to use that so that it's easier to grind through. We'll probably not talk much while we're grinding, unless Scott, you have anything else you'd like to add.
Sure. So people at home, please begin grinding. I'm gonna purge, I call it, with 2 or 3 grams of beans, because I know that my grinder holds about 2 or 3 grams. If you've got a commercial grinder, you might need to purge with like 5 or 7 grams. Yeah, let's grind and then we'll come back and chat in a few minutes. So Ryan, I think we should say for the people at home that if you fall behind, if you're going a little slower than us or anything like that, feel free to pause your video, even if you're watching us live. You know, don't worry about it. Pause the video for 30 seconds or a minute, catch up, make sure that you're going at a pace you feel comfortable with. It's going to be the same experience for you.
Perfect. Yeah. You know, and one piece of equipment that I forgot to mention earlier is that I always take notes when I cup. Often that will just be a notebook or a blank piece of paper. I'm very comfortable and I have several different cupping score sheets already printed. So I typically use one of those and a clipboard, and I use a pencil to take notes because sometimes there's some furious erasing. So I'll have that handy with me. I also want to point out that in many cupping situations, it would be inappropriate to discuss openly during the cupping what it is that you're sensing, what aromas or fragrances or tastes you're experiencing during the cupping. It's usually more appropriate to fully evaluate and analyze a sample and then to group or talk at the end about what it is that you scored the coffee, experienced in the coffee. We're going to break that rule. So if you are a person who really dislikes spoilers, there's spoilers abound in the rest of this cupping. We're immediately going to talk about the fragrances that we're getting from each of these samples. So speaking of fragrance, there are 3 times that we're going to evaluate what we smell in these coffees, at least focused on what we smell in these coffees. One of them is about to happen right now. It's just as we ground the coffee. It's the fragrance evaluation. And for fragrance and then aroma when we pour the coffee, and then finally when we break the crust that forms on the coffees after we've brewed them, we're essentially looking for 3 things. One of them is it a good smell or a bad smell? It's very, very subjective, at least initially. The second is it a strong smell or a weak smell? And then finally, what particular descriptions come out to you when you are smelling it? What is it that it reminds you of, or what is it that you perceive in what you're smelling?
So Ryan, I want to point out that I find the fragrance, the dry aroma, kind of difficult sometimes. And I don't want people at home to feel bad or feel like they're doing something wrong if they smell it and they think like, I don't have a word for that smell. It's really okay. That happens to me all the time with certain coffee samples in certain situations. So just you know, at home, just know that it's perfectly normal sometimes with the dry fragrance to feel like I'm not really sure what I'm smelling.
100%. A lot of cupping is essentially a form of muscle memory around when I smell something like this, I remember that this is how I describe it. The important thing is that you're creating a lexicon, a language for both yourself and for others that is communicable and understandable. And that is part of getting better at tasting coffee, is being able to describe it. However, oftentimes the first sample, especially, it just smells like coffee to me. And I know that might sound crazy coming from a coffee taster, but that's just the reality. So sometimes you'll see me go through a set of samples and return to the first one. The first one didn't have the benefit of the contextual or contrasting aspect where after I smell the first one, well, the second one is already anchored to that first one. So after I go to number 4, going back to number 1 will be a different experience than when I first smell it.
You know, that actually, I love that you always talk about context when it comes to cupping. We've talked about how it would be impossible to score coffees if you didn't have the context of learning to score with other people. You've told me before that you never cup one coffee in isolation because even if it's quite a different coffee, you want some other coffee on the table for context. And I think that's really important for people to know. And it was important for me to learn that, you know, cupping coffee isn't like some perfectly objective thing you're supposed to be able to do in a vacuum. Like almost everything we're talking about and doing has some relativistic aspect. So, you know, I agree with Ryan. The first cup I smell, I never know what I'm smelling. And then when I'm done with all the cups, I go back to the first one. And then with all that context, now it's like, oh yeah, this one is pretty fruity, you know, et cetera.
Yeah, perfect. I think there's a lot more to say about that. I would like to smell these. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in.
Yes.
Again, so remember, good, bad, strong, weak, and then what do you smell? What does it remind you of? And just feel free to take notes if you can, or jot it down in your memory.
So Ryan, I like to shake the grounds when I do the fragrance. I confess. I feel
You're a
like
shaker?
I'm a shaker. I feel like it releases a little aroma, but it could also just be some psychosomatic thing where I feel like I'm doing something to help this along.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not without certain.
I've seen you shake before.
Tick is maybe that, like, I have certain ticks throughout the cupping process that I'm variously conscious of. I smell, personally, I like to smell the cup before I shake it, and then also again after I tap it a little bit. There's some interesting volatile acids, and this is an opportunity to experience them before it becomes much harder to detect them. Scott, I would love to hear what you are smelling in these.
Well, I'm going to sound like a salesperson, but on the first cup, I know this is silly, but I mean, I've tasted this coffee because, you know, these aren't blind to you and me. I mean, we've tasted these coffees many times, but I'm getting a nice lilac that wasn't there before. This coffee to me always has like a mellow kind of creaminess rather than like a, you know, very you know, extremely sharp or fruity flavors. But I'm really enjoying the floral notes in this one.
Absolutely,
and,
yeah.
How about you?
Well, I think the predominant characteristic of this coffee is it's a chocolatey coffee, and it's positioned. I have some curation in this table, and I deliberately put a coffee that was meant to be approachable and have a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of dark chocolate, and some of the sort of hints at fruit that come from a nice dark chocolate. So that's what I smell in this first sample.
Yep.
What about the second sample?
And by the way, intensity-wise, I felt the first one was not particularly strong, but kind of average.
Okay.
I say that because the second one, I've cupped these coffees many times. The second one, I always have the hardest time getting any intensity out of the fragrance. I get a little bit of citrus, a little bit of orange, but it's not a strong note for me.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, this coffee is a lot of vanilla, molasses or brown sugar, even something fancy like marshmallow. But yeah, there's something a little bit orange or even green apple about the fruit quality in this.
I like that you consider marshmallows fancy. That's good.
Huh. I mean, in my household, they're very fancy. We bring them out for only the nicest occasions. What about 3?
3, I really I've always been in love with 3. Like, I get a lot of citrus and a little bit of like a red grape or raisin in this one. Like this one has like a plush wine sort of aroma, which I really like.
Yeah. A lot of raisin, some interesting spice, I think, underneath that, the fruit quality. So, you know, cinnamon definitely, perhaps something like cardamom, and yeah, just a very sweet and interesting herbal undertones to it. And 4, which I don't even think you needed to grind 4 in order to evaluate the fragrance.
So 4 is obviously a little bit of an outlier on the table. 4 is interesting because for me anyway, we've tasted this at different roast levels and at different times, and it is so intensely cherry-ish. There's such a ripe, deep cherry note to this coffee, which is beautiful. Yeah, I mean this one, I mean, it definitely has some florals. It definitely has like a very bold fruitiness in a you know, extremely kind of dark, ripe way, which is just, I think this one straddles the line between the kind of aromatics that are crowd pleasing, but the kind of aromatics that are also like really exciting to people like us who like interesting coffees.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I echo all of what you're smelling in that. The one I'll add is, and in the dark fruit, it comes across as kind of like a plum or a prune to me. And then also there's that black cherry. It reminds me of a cola, like Coca-Cola sort of fragrance. Maybe even something getting into category of soda that is getting more specific, like Dr. Pepper. Just has that really interesting, sweet smelling cola-like flavor. Wonderful.
Alrighty.
I can hear my water rolling.
Yep.
How is yours?
So mine is at 208 Fahrenheit, which is like 98 Celsius. I want to say to people that the water temperature for cupping, anything a few degrees below boiling is good. Like I tend to cup at about 207 if you have a temperature controlled scale, a temperature controlled kettle, like 97C, 207 Fahrenheit is good. If you don't have any way to measure the temperature, just boil it and leave it for 1 minute and it'll cool a few degrees and that's fine. Ryan is at extremely high altitude. Ryan is at about 1,600 meters or 5,000 feet altitude. So his water boils quite a bit lower temperature than mine. So you might see Ryan, if you can, I don't think we can tell, but Ryan will probably pour right off the boil in order to preserve as much heat as he can.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I will. Some would say I'm a mile high.
Yes.
I will be, so I will be weighing my water. We have 4 samples and it's very easy to do that. And it's a good way to make sure that they're consistent. These bowls are particularly well, they're almost all exactly within a gram of the same weight. And water weight, with coffee weight, you need to be extremely precise. With water weight, if you're off by a few grams, totally okay. Scott would say it's 1/17 as important as making sure that your coffee is precise, which is true, just mathematically speaking. I'll keep time for us, Scott. I'll start a timer going up, counting up when I take this off and start pouring 170 grams in each of these bowls.
Yep.
I'm gonna go now.
All right, fantastic.
Okay. If you're not ready, just pause, and I would encourage you to synchronize with our pour.
You might notice that I have a gooseneck kettle. Ryan has a more traditional like tea kettle style spout. It doesn't matter. I actually prefer the kind that Ryan has because the gooseneck takes a little while to pour, but it's not important to have a certain type of kettle for cupping, which is kind of a godsend.
So as you pour, I'm just going to say that the second time that we're going to evaluate the aroma is going to happen right after we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And same as with fragrance, I want you to focus on, is it good? Is it bad? Is it strong? Is it weak? And what descriptors come out to you while you're smelling? We won't have time to discuss the aroma until after we break, at least not at length. You are done with your scale once you've finished pouring. So I like to put my stuff away when I'm done with it. I encourage you to do the same.
Okay, I've finished pouring. No more scale, kettle, grinder.
Oh, and one other thing. So I pour 2. I try to pour immediately. I pour 2 rinse bowls. I pour one for the first part of the cupping. The first part of the cupping creates a lot of mess, at least in your rinse bowl. But I like to make sure my water is about the same temperature as my coffee, so I don't burn my tongue on freshly poured hot water. So that's why I use 2 rinse bowls. The first one I'll be done with in just a few minutes, and I'll put it away as well and have the second one ready.
So Ryan, a quick note. Some of my coffees are forming more of a crust than others, and I just want people to feel okay with that. I've had people email me many times saying, I had a coffee that had no crust, what should I do? And sometimes no crust means it's just a very light roast or even underdeveloped, but it's generally speaking, like I've had brilliant coffees with crust, brilliant coffees with no crust. It's not a big deal. I don't want people to worry that something's wrong.
Got it.
Okay, so you're smelling now, yeah?
Yeah, we have about a minute left to smell.
Okay. I'm gonna try not to let my AirPods fall in the coffee like that other time.
Yeah, don't do it. So as with before, good, bad, strong, weak, what do you smell?
The first cup I'm getting, are we talking now about that?
Let's wait until we break,
yeah,
just
sorry.
for the sake of time.
Oh, yeah.
No
yeah, no, that's a good idea. It's a weird experience to be discussing as we go. I feel like we're breaking the rules.
We are breaking the rules. Breaking the rules, breaking the crusts. What else should we break? So when I break, which I'll do here in about 10 seconds, I try to keep my motion the same across all the cups. I break down to the bottom. I stir the bottom of the bowl. I'm going to go forward, back, and forward again as I take one deep inhale. Go ahead and rinse your spoon between each one of the breaks. Wow. Okay. I'm excited to see what you have to say about these, Scott. Before we do that, let's go ahead and clean the top of these off. There's no reason to be obsessive about this. This is the one time you're going to use your second spoon. We're just going to put them next to each other and skim the top, trying to get just that khaki colored coffee sludge on the top of each bowl.
Yep. So we're pulling towards ourselves with the bowl of the spoon at about the equator, and kind of pulling all that sludge towards us and then out of the cup. You know, Ryan, once I gotta say it, once I cupped with Mia, and she had the ability to clean all of the sludge with no effort immediately, and I've never been able to pull that off. I feel like she was a master of the sludge cleaning.
Yeah, that explains her in most aspects of life. Truly.
Got that knack.
Okay, so I'm going to get rid of my second rinse bowl and cupping spoon, and now I have one rinse bowl that will be adequate for the rest of the cupping. If you came with one rinse bowl, I would probably suggest dumping it and rinsing it and adding more hot water. If it's possible, add a little bit of cool water too. I really don't want anyone to burn their tongue. Better to have the water a little too cool than a little too hot.
Yeah, warm, not boiling for your spoon cup is great. Yeah. Okay. This
Scott,
is interesting
about
right?
what? Yeah.
Because we cupped these together yesterday when we were kind of going through a trial run, and today the wet aroma is more intense and more enjoyable than yesterday, which is interesting.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Cup number one, I still got some of that creamy vanilla in this, but I got a little bit of red apple and blood orange. I don't know if blood orange is really the right word, but it's that version of orange that's like extremely ripe. Like it's a little bit sweeter versus acidic version of orange, you know?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned blood. I pay particular attention when I'm eating fruit, and I've noticed that what blood orange does really well is it it pairs sweetness and bitterness really well.
Oh yeah.
Which is something, which is fully appropriate for coffee. And I agree, the aroma on one seems to be the fruit quality of it really seems to be intensifying in a structured, pleasant way. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. Yesterday it was more of the creamy vanilla type coffee. Today it's got more of the fruit coming through and more of the florals, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay.
What about two?
The creaminess and the milk chocolate notes dominated for me. Which is funny because yesterday they were slightly fruitier. Today the creaminess is taking over the cup for me.
The thing that really stood out to me in the aroma was this like dark honey quality, not quite floral, something almost akin to a brown sugar, but it just was distinctly a dark honey to me when I was breaking it.
Nice. Okay.
What about 3?
So number 3, I'm getting a really nice like red grape aroma. This could be because I've been craving red grapes for the last week, but I'm pretty sure that it's a real thing.
Such an odd craving.
I know. It's but that's sort of dominating for me. There is still a hint of that citrus, a little bit of that orangey note.
Yeah, my break had the aroma of pomegranate, which I know sounds like a very obscure reference, but there was something that was red about it, but it wasn't quite a berry red. It was this more interesting fruit quality that I've become familiar with over cuppings of this coffee.
Yeah. I feel like there are certain words like pomegranate and Meyer lemon and blood orange that happen all the time in cupping, but not in real life very often. It's a funny thing.
I mean, certainly depending on where you are. Yeah.
But I like the pomegranate note. The last one, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm still getting. I mean, for me, I don't have your nose, and cherry is just dominating for me in this cup. There's a little more floral now than there was earlier when we first poured or when it was dry. I'm really curious to taste this coffee because the aroma is such an outlier.
Yeah, that black cherry, like a black cherry syrup, like a snow cone syrup almost kind of thing. It really, really intense in the aroma, more so than in the fragrance. I was just kind of blown away by that when I broke.
And we talked about this once before. Sometimes we're tasting things like black cherry, not so much like, it doesn't remind me as much of eating the fruit, but more like when you eat like a black cherry flavored candy. Like it sounds bad, but it's good. Like the manufactured version of the flavor more so than the fruit itself, but it's so intense in a good way,
Yeah, I mean, if you don't like black cherry candy, what are you even doing here?
I don't know.
I mean, because that sounds delicious.
Black cherry. Yep. Okay. So where are we at on time, Ryan?
So we poured about 11 minutes ago.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about how I cup. So the important thing for me is getting a really good understanding of the full profile of each sample. So instead of rushing through them, while context is important, instead of rushing through them, I'm going to spend a little bit of time with each sample. One slurp is adequate. Sometimes I'll take a second, but the important thing is that you want to maintain your stamina to cup through the samples. And if you rush through them and have to rush through them multiple times to really understand each coffee, or to understand, for that matter, the finish or aftertaste of the coffee, you'll do yourself a disservice as you fatigue your tasting abilities.
Yeah.
I typically will do 3 to 4 passes, one when they're pretty warm, like around 12, 13, 14 minutes. And then I'll space out subsequent passes a few minutes after that.
Okay.
I think we'll probably do 2 passes today, Scott. On the first pass, I think we can continue to talk about what we're tasting, the descriptors that we're tasting. And then if it would be interesting to you, I'd like to talk about how I would score each of these samples and
Definitely. That's one of the things I'm here for. Okay.
Perfect.
So the message I'm getting from you is slurp consciously. And I'm really guilty in the past of slurping over and over and over from a bowl, trying to force an impression. And that probably was getting in my way. And if I would just take a slurp, let it sit on the palate, think about it, take my time, I'd probably have a more sensitive palate, have less palate fatigue, and probably get a better, deeper impression of the coffee.
That's what I would encourage.
Yep.
There are days where I have to cup many tables, and it is noticeable that towards the last tables,
oh yeah,
I can feel the fatigue, not emotionally and mentally, but also that, but in my ability to continue to perceive the qualities in the samples that I need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to
let's go ahead and try them. They might be
we're going to slurp and talk about it, and then we're eventually going to go with another pass and do some scoring, right?
Scott, why do we have to slurp?
Oh yeah, because when you spray the coffee into your mouth, it creates lots of little droplets, which increases the surface area of the coffee quite a bit. And that will release a lot more aromatics, and it'll give you a much greater aromatic impression. So I think most coffee people know this, but most of so something like 90% of the information we're going to get about these coffees is through our nose, not through our tongue. And most of that comes from something called retronasal olfaction. So it's actually when you're smelling something that's already in your mouth, and you're getting the aromas from kind of the other end of your nasal cavity, rather than sort of an external olfaction where you're just smelling like we've already done. So for me anyway, I like to slurp, and I like to pause for a moment before I spit the coffee out and really let that retronasal olfaction happen and give it a moment to get an impression and for it to work.
Nice, yeah. I'll slurp and I'll actually swish the coffee around in my mouth, not like Listerine swish, but just like a kind of a relaxed swish to make sure that I'm getting that retronasal going. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Again, rinse your spoon between bowls is considered appropriate.
This is interesting,
for
Ryan,
this for this pass, just focus on the flavors, the descriptors that you're noticing as you taste the coffees. Sorry, I cut you off there, Scott.
No, that's okay. Do you want to discuss these as we go, or do you want to go do a pass first?
I would love, yeah, let's do that. That sounds fantastic.
So I find this interesting because in the aromatics, we often get a lot of vanilla on this coffee, but as the coffee has brewed and cooled, I'm getting more of that appley orange citrus.
Yeah.
And it's really quite pleasant. More floral than in previous passes with this coffee and other days.
Yeah, this coffee has surprised me in that it's turned out to be a juicier coffee than I expected.
Yeah.
So when I initially cupped it, it was a more chocolatey coffee, a more kind of like chocolate and like pleasant almond candy, like a marzipan or something. But yeah, apple, raspberry, it's got some juice to it. It's a fun coffee.
Yeah. And I will say, eventually we'll reveal what these coffees are. I mean, this to me is this origin rarely in the past produced really fruity coffee, but I feel like it's happening more and more, and that's exciting.
Moving on to number 2.
Okay. I'm getting more. This one's also in the cup is surprisingly fruity relative to its creamier aromas, but I'm getting a pretty intense red apple, like a Macintosh apple, and a little bit of limey / tangerine citrus. Yeah, and I this is, for lack of a better way to put it, like this is the kind of coffee I personally really enjoy. Like it's a little bit more delicate and nuanced than a lot of other coffees. And I like its prettiness.
Yeah, what stands out? So I agree on the notes, the kind of like limey, orange, sweet citrus notes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also getting this really pleasant brown sugar quality that I was starting to get towards the end of the aroma evaluation and now moving into this warmer cup.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do 3.
Okay. So, I mean, we've tasted 3 many times together, and the raisin quality is super interesting and dominant for me. This time it's this time there's more citrus and there's a little bit more acidity, because this has always been like if there's a scale of sort of sweetness to acidity, this one for me has always been on the riper, sweeter side, but today it's coming out with a little bit perkier acidity than previously.
Yeah. I feel like this will not be worth watching if people didn't hear me say that this coffee is increasingly reminding me of a cinnamon roll. Like it's got
so true.
It's got vanilla icing, it's got that raisin, it's got cinnamon and maybe some other spice like cardamom. I agree. Like now we're starting to get some interesting. This is getting outside of a cinnamon roll. At least the cinnamon rolls I've tried. It has kind of a more like raisin, but also kind of a grapey acidity to it.
Yeah,
like a green grape acidity to it. Yeah, it's turning out to be kind of a cinnamon roll in a cup, but also with some other interesting fruit acid qualities. What about 4?
So
very different.
On the positive side, I still get that nice deep ripe black cherry. Although it's tasting more like the fruit now and less like the manufactured version. I don't want to be critical of it because I genuinely like it, but I'm getting a little bit of like a red apple peel, like a little hint of bitterness that part of it feels kind of complementary to the coffee, and part of it I'm like, this wasn't there on previous tastings of it. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but it makes it more interesting.
Yeah. I get the bitterness, although I interpret it as this like an interesting Dutch cocoa kind of.
All right.
Like, because there's almost a dryness to it. I personally find it to be very complementary to the profile of like, I feel like it mixes well with that dark cherry, those sort of cola aspects, those other kind of drier and like it blends juicy and dry in a fascinating way.
Yeah. It's a bit of a subjective note about cupping in general, tasting coffee, but we focus so much on the fruity and sweeter aspects of coffee, but I think when we step back, we have to always look at like all of these lightly roasted coffees always have components of sourness and bitterness. But I think as coffee professionals, we kind of got used to those and we kind of filter them out. And I feel like if coffee had no bitterness, it would not be interesting. And I think we kind of pretend coffee doesn't have bitterness. Like, oh, this is amazing coffee, it has no bitterness. But really, like, there is a complementariness to having some bitterness, some sourness, and and this makes it interesting to me.
The way I think about bitterness is maybe an analogy would be how I think about bass in music. If you notice it, in some cases, if you prominently notice it, it might not be the best thing. But even when you don't notice it, it's there, and it's what ties the whole arrangement together. It's what ties the coffee together and gives it balance.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I thought it would be interesting to talk about 4 particular qualities and how I would score those. I think that there's probably more time needed to fully discuss score sheets and scoring, but what I would like to do is at least tell you what I would score each of these samples today, doing it live, and in particular discuss how I think about a few very important aspects when I'm evaluating any green sample, which are clean cup, sweetness, acidity, and balance. And I picked those for a reason, but they're also, to me, I think they kind of define most of what you're evaluating when you're evaluating green coffee. There's some notable missing attributes, and I'm ready to defend that position. But just to talk about each of them, clean cup is another way of saying that you are tasting with transparency what the terroir and variety of that sample holds. You're not experiencing defects in harvest, in plant husbandry, in nutrition, in processing or roasting or brewing for that matter, that are essentially creating a barrier between you and understanding what that coffee's intrinsic qualities are. Sweetness is pretty much as simple as it sounds. It's the perception that a coffee is sweeter or less sweet. Human beings are very well attuned to experiencing the perception of sweetness. We do it all the time. And it's, essentially, if it's sweeter, especially for coffee, we like that more. And if it's less sweet, we like that less. What's important to couple with that is acidity. Acidity sounds like different things to different people. I'll probably use the analogy that makes the most sense to me, which is that acidity in coffee is like carbonation in soda. I talk about soda all the time, apparently. And just like in soda, if you let a soda go flat, you'll still have all of the same flavors in the can or the bottle, but they won't taste the same to you. They'll taste flat and it will taste dull. That's what acidity does. Acidity carries flavor. It catalyzes flavor. It's what gives coffee its snap, and it's what, paired with sweetness, gives it its juicy, pleasant qualities. And then finally, balance. And balance is best described as when the flavors and the body and the sweetness and the acidity of a cup of coffee harmonize well together in a pleasant way. And for the purpose of today, I want to focus on the idea that balance is about when sweetness and acidity are well matched for each other. If you have a very acidic, not sweet coffee, it's going to taste sour. If you have a very sweet but not acidic coffee, it's going to not quite feel as lively as it should. And in some cases, it will be very unpleasant. I think you can see this in fruit as well. As fruit ripens, it essentially goes from higher acid to higher sweetness. And at a certain point, they kind of meet in the middle and everything is perfect. And then if you wait too long, they still have the sweetness, but they kind of are losing their acidity.
That's a great analogy. I like that.
Oh, thank you. I wish I could say I just came up with it.
That's great. I feel a lot of clarity about those 4 features. That's excellent.
Perfect. So what I'll do, Scott, I'm gonna tell you what I would score each one of these.
Okay.
Yeah. So 1 to me is a very clean cup. I would score it. And just to be clear, what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to tell you it has the clean cup of a 87 or 86 or 85. I'm going to tell you what I think that clean cup matches in an overall score. And they'll mix, and I'll kind of then give you an overall score. To me, it's a very clean cup that I'm cupping today. I would say it's probably an 87.5 for clean cup. Sweetness is probably an 86.5. It's got great sweetness. Acidity, I would probably say, is an 87, and I would give the balance an 87 as well. I would score number 1.
You have averaged out to 87 perfectly on your 4 components.
Yes. I can math.
I would like to talk about this more after we do this, but I just want to say to people at home that although this seems like an unusual way to score, I think it's going to make a lot of sense when we talk about it afterward. I mean, usually like on cupping sheets, you score things like what, like 1 to 6 or something like that. Like there's different weights for different things, but we've talked a lot about context and I really like Ryan's sort of anchoring system where he's talking about like the context of like, this reminds me of the clean cup of an 87 kind of thing. But anyway, sorry to interrupt you on that.
No, that's great. Yeah, I want to add, this is the point of Facsimile. There is no way, it doesn't matter how many books, manuals, protocol, guidelines you read, you cannot learn how to cup on your own. Cupping is fundamentally a means of communicating with others about a coffee. And there's a ton of arbitrary tradition built into scores. For example, I've cupped probably, I don't know, 30,000 samples in my life. I'm not counting, but that's just a ballpark guess. And I would say 99.9% of them are between an 80 and a 90. It's a 100-point scale. I've only used basically 10% of it. That doesn't fit any bell curve. There's no reason why that should be the case. So that's an example of how the only way to get better at cupping is to cup with other people. And it's why we made Facsimile. That was how I learned the most as a green coffee buyer, as a new green coffee buyer, as a new cupper, was by cupping with others in various situations and understanding what they perceived, what they scored it. And that helped me get to a place where I was better able to communicate with others about what I was experiencing or about and understand what they were experiencing.
So Ryan, to your point, the very first time I used a score sheet, I had no tutoring in it. I had no training in it. And I gave a really nice coffee a 70. And I had actually no way of knowing whether that was reasonable or not. I didn't know if I was accurate by standards. I mean, so, you've taught me that it's really all about calibration and communication. It's kind of impossible for someone to just take up scoring and be remotely accurate by our standards without having learned from others who have experience.
Yeah. I would be sad if someone misinterpreted what we're saying as your score is wrong if you don't have my score or if you don't have Scott's score. It's possible your score is wrong, but really your score is wrong if when you look at it, you don't feel like it's properly communicating to someone else what you felt about the coffee. If there was a nice coffee that you scored 70 and you told someone I scored it a 70, you probably were not properly communicating to them how much you liked it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's learning a language. I mean, it's, what an 85 is something someone has to train you to know, in a sense, Anyway, okay. So cup number 2.
Really standing out to me how much this coffee is turning into like an interesting nougaty toffee. I would score this coffee an 86.5. It has the sweetness of an 87. It has the acidity of an 86.
Yeah.
It has the clean cup of an 86, and I would say it has the balance of an 87. Like the sweetness and the acidity are pretty well balanced. They're not perfectly balanced.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. The acidity on this cup, I think like the very first time we sampled it, it was slightly perkier. The acidity is quite pleasant, but not its main feature, not its exciting feature anymore.
Yeah. It has it's very much a coffee that's about sugar browning. Like it's and I know lots of other cuppers who love the nougat, the toffee, that sweet caramelized sugar and sweet nuts that are in a coffee like this.
Sure.
All right, let's talk about 3. I would give 3 87. I would say that clean cup is around 86.5. There's like that herbal quality.
Oh yeah.
Is creating a little bit of a filter in tasting the intrinsic qualities of the underlying sample. But it's sweet and it has nice acid. I would say those are both, you know, probably north of 87.25, 87.5. I try not to do quarter of a point too often.
87.27 perhaps?
A generous 87, a very full 87. And yeah, I mean, but overall, I think it's an 87.5 in balance. Like I think the sweetness and the acidity are really well matched for each other.
Okay, excellent. So the fourth one interests me because like to my perception, to my understanding, and I think I'm wrong about this, but I think to my perception, like the balance of acidity to sweetness is skewed towards sweetness, but I think that I think I'm not understanding the definitions well enough with that. So I'm really curious how you're going to score the acidity and sweetness on this coffee.
So I would score this coffee 88.5.
Okay.
I think it's supremely sweet. What I like about this coffee and you know, as we learn more details, not all coffees that are processed the way that this coffee is capture acidity as well as this one does.
Right.
That's what makes this coffee kind of an exception to the rule about its type, is that it's supremely, is that it has really pleasant acidity and that's what's allowing for those clean, ripe flavors that are in the bowl. So fruit flavors. So clean cup, I would say 87.5.
Okay.
Sweetness and acidity, I would probably say 89. And balance, I would say 89. It's just like, that's what I think for a coffee like this, the usual downfall is the lack of balance. It usually has a ton of sweetness and doesn't have the acidity to hold up that sweetness, and this one does.
I like how I'm just going to say it out loud, Ryan, but I think you're dancing around the fact that this is a natural. And what's interesting to me about naturals and this coffee is that oftentimes naturals have that fermenty, stewed fruit sweetness that can be kind of weird at times. And this coffee has a lot cleaner sweetness and like a zingier acidity than most naturals do. And actually, the very first time I ever tasted this coffee on a table with a bunch of the coffees that were all washed, like I didn't actually even notice it was a natural. It didn't occur to me right away. And I like that. Like I know that we're both known for not being huge fans of naturals, but I think to be fair, we're both fans of clean coffee, and we're both a little bit. I think if I can say this, we prefer to not have the processing, influence on the coffee hit us in the face. We prefer that we're experiencing the terroir more so than the processing. Of course, everything's contributing to the cup, and I really like this coffee because it's a much more transparent cup than most naturals, where I feel like the fermenty sweetness can be overwhelming and throw off the balance.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is the goal, is when you're tasting it, you're thinking more about the variety or the terroir, the intrinsic qualities of the cup. And if you're thinking about the processing without being prompted, then it's typically because there's something that is not right, that there's something that's wrong. There was an experiment maybe gone wrong, an experimental coffee gone wrong.
And I want to say I personally, I think it's great. Like if you love some, funky process that creates some kind of weird flavors that would be weird to me or weird to you, and they're very prominent in the cup. But if you like that, that's 100% fine. That's great. Like whatever you want to like. This is more about trying to analyze and objectively look at and communicate coffee flavors. But I don't ever want people to think like there's something wrong with what you like. It's not that at all. I think we're both on the side, so to speak, of like cleanliness, transparency, terroir. We don't care how we get there. If we get there through some various processing methods, great. That's wonderful.
Yeah, perfect. Scott, can I share a little bit about what each of these samples are?
I would love that.
Okay. So, and just for your reference, in the notes, there is a link where you can see the details of each of these samples. I'll share a few of the details, but if you want to read all about them, you can.
So in the notes on the YouTube channel, right? Like on
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, there is, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a very small quantity of some of these coffees left. The nature of what we're doing, we will sometimes have a little bit of green coffee left. And in a few days, we're going to roast the last of 1 and 2. And if you wanted to get yourself an extra bag of one of those are available.
Ryan,
we used up all of 3 and 4.
Like 1 and 2 came in 70 kilo bags. 3 and 4 came in 60 kilo bags. The nature of our business is that we're not a daily roastery that always has like an outlet for all of our coffee. So in this case, like we have a couple batches of potential roasting to do of 1 and 2 still, because we had extra green of that. So
which means we'll be roasting it expressly for you.
Yes.
Insert your name here. We're roasting it for you.
Okay, so number 1.
Yeah, 1 is Flores, and Flores is from San Ignacio, Peru, and it's a blend of red and yellow Caturra. And Falcon imported this coffee for us.
Wonderful. I want to say that can I talk to you about these as we go?
Yes, you can.
In my limited experience with Peru over the years, I find them often to be kind of minerally and not very heavy on the fruit, but more heavy on the base notes. And I'm really fascinated that this coffee and Peruvian coffees, some of the better ones in general, are starting to seem fruitier to me. Am I imagining this? Is that an evolution that's happening?
There's been a huge evolution in the way that coffee is being sourced from Peru over the past decade that I think is making it a lot easier for the great coffees to make it to the market, to the specialty coffee market. What I don't feel totally comfortable saying is Peru suddenly got good. I think that what I think is more likely is that the buying of Peru got better, so that the better lots are getting pulled out, separated, pulled out, and appropriately compensated for the extra effort.
Excellent. Okay.
2 is Aguas Claras, and it's from Huila, Colombia. Both 1, 2, and 3 are washed coffees. And it's a mix of varieties as well, Colombia, Castillo, and Caturra. And this coffee was imported by Caravela. I am a longtime lover of coffees from Huila, Colombia. I think that they offer the most dynamic red fruit, cherry and berry flavors in Colombia. And I fall backwards for them all of the time. I always fall in love with them. This is a very different Huila than other Huilas that I'm looking forward to sharing with Facsimile, but it's another
I thought this one was a little more delicate and dainty than like what my stereotypical Colombian Huila would be. And I love that. I loved it was very pretty.
Yeah. Perfect. 3 is Kinini. It's from the Rulindo District of the Northern Province of Rwanda. It's another washed coffee. And as with so many Rwandan coffees, it is marketed as being 100% Bourbon. And that was imported by Crop to Cup.
Excellent.
I think it's very common for Rwandan coffees, especially from my experience, especially from the northern part of Rwanda, to have that distinct raisin flavor.
Yep.
And number 4 is a naturally processed coffee. So Scott, you were right. Surprise, you were right.
Somebody told me.
Yeah, Abera Degela. It's a coffee from Chobesa Gedeb, Ethiopia. And that was imported by Royal Oakland.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
So we are really excited for our next cupping. We're going to try to be a little bit secretive, not secretive, that's not the right word, but we're not going to tell you what the next coffees are, but it's an exciting cupping, very different table than this one, and a really wonderful guest who I'm looking forward to cupping them with. It will not be Scott. Scott might also join us if I'm lucky enough to cup those coffees, but we'll have another guest with who's really appropriate for the coffees that we're cupping, who has experience with them.
So I will say about the next cupping, I think that I'm excited for various reasons, but I think I'm expecting that I haven't tasted these coffees yet, but I expect that the scoring will be across a wider range, probably.
I think you're right.
And I think that I'm really interested to see what your guest has to say. She's going to be, I think the first of many very interesting guests. We're going to bring in producers, importers, people who have a lot to say about these coffees and have a lot of experience. And I'm not a green buying expert, and I feel like more of a student of this. But I think that the future guests will have a lot to add about origin, processing, et cetera. And I'm pretty excited to learn from them.
Yeah. So 2 more things. I want to come back to that in a second, but if you received this chocolate and you
for the 2 people who haven't
immediately rip it open and eat it, which this is probably the 5th one Scott sent me, because each time I see it, I just rip it open and eat it immediately. Go ahead and go get that, because we have a special guest who's about to join us and talk more about it. If you did eat it, go into your trash bin and get out the paper so that you can at least hold the paper and remember what it was like when you tasted it, for that special guest. Yeah, so one other thing I wanted to say, Scott, is that this was very much a kind of a beta experience for us. Yeah. And so I want to take a moment to thank you to all of you who subscribed, who trusted us and subscribed. Send us your feedback, send us your notes, send us your comments, send us your questions, send us your hate mail. We want to hear, send love mail too. Send an equal amount of love mail. Make sure that 1 love mail has been sent for each hate mail that you send, because we're figuring out what is most helpful, and we're going to be taking that feedback extremely seriously. Thank you so much. I'm happy to tell you that it only goes up from here with both the samples and the cupping and the guests.
Yes.
Okay, so I am going to.
We're going to be joined by Nick Dale from Condor Chocolates. I worked with Nick for a little while on his roasting, and along the way, he told me about this chocolate that he has, although the package says this is not chocolate. And there is coffee in the chocolate. And to me, this was probably the best version of a coffee flavored foodstuff that I've ever had. And I'd love to introduce Nick and have him tell us more about this chocolate, and then taste it together.
Yep. Hello, everybody.
Hey,
my honor. Sorry, kind of hard to tell here.
Yes, you were on.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Scott and Ryan, for having me. Thank you for thinking of me. And I will confess, we cupped these coffees a little while ago, not live, with some of my staff, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually can't wait to take some of these notes back and kind of discuss with them. and a real great learning opportunity. But yeah, so I guess, Scott, you're holding up let me kind of introduce myself. I'm Nick Dale. I'm from Condor Chocolates. We're located in Athens, Georgia. We are a bean to bar chocolate manufacturer. And we have also recently got into coffee roasting. And this is kind of an interesting product that we started developing and working on with the help of actually another coffee roaster in the beginning. And it's just kind of blown up, and I know Scott has enjoyed it, has had several of these bars. But yeah, if for the people who haven't tried it, it is definitely it is not chocolate, as the label clearly says on there. There is no cocoa nibs. There is cocoa butter in the product. It's just sugar, coffee, cocoa butter. But yeah, I will kind of go back a little bit. This was a product that we were approached by a local coffee roaster, and this wasn't the first time that a product had been this idea has been brought forward, and but they wanted to try something new, try something different. And so I was at a good time, and I was like, yeah, let's bring it on. Let's do some R&D with this product. And we started test roasting. They started test roasting some coffees for us, and we started basically came up with some chocolate recipes, and I took the cocoa beans out and just added coffee beans. And to be honest, the first couple roasts and samples we did were pretty bad. They're really bitter. And so we kept working back and forth. We went lighter on our roasts, and yeah, it just wasn't good, to be honest. And we kind of hit the point and it was a realization. I think this is where we turned the corner on turning it into a much more palatable product. Was the coffee that we were getting, and coffees that are on the table. These were all coffees that have been roasted and designed to be extracted and turned into a beverage. Where we were taking that and then we're trying to eat it, which is just not, it wasn't right. So that's when our chocolate making and our chocolate roasting side came in, and I basically roasted it like cocoa beans. So it is coffee is very, much quicker in terms of cocoa beans. Our roast of cocoa beans will last 20, 30 minutes at a time. Much slower. Our EORs are low mid 220s. So very different concept than roasting coffee. So I blended coffee and cacao and basically ended up with this kind of a roasting curve that was very palatable, very easy to eat. We were extremely, part of it, we were just going and not knowing what we're doing, just to be honest. And it turned out really well.
Sure.
And yeah, I guess that's the product that we roasted it. Scott, I can send you some pictures of the beans themselves in the cooling bin, and it's very, very, it's pre first crack for sure. And it's just,
oh wow,
you look at it, you're like, I don't know if I want to eat that, to be honest. But at that point, we actually take it, put it into all of our normal chocolate making equipment, our grinders, our melangers. We add cocoa butter, sugar. It's roughly the equivalent sugar content wise of a 72% dark bar. It's kind of what we're going for. For us, that's a good standard dark chocolate, and that's what we were going for. And then we mold it and shape it. It's been pleasantly surprised with it. It will caffeinate you, especially after a cupping.
Yes.
It will definitely, the caffeine hits you a little bit differently, to be honest. We do live in a university town, so students love it, especially in final season. I guess let me just a minute longer, just chat a little bit about the coffee itself that we decided to go with. So it is at Condor. So I am actually, my mother's from Ecuador. So all of our cocoa and all of our coffee do come from Ecuador. And the coffee that we use, we've become good, friends and partners with Hacienda La Papaya, Juan Pena. And we've worked with him on a couple of different projects. So we already had coffee in-house from him. And we were having a coffee. We were working with his basic Típico washed coffee. And one day it just came out and it's like, this just tastes like chocolate cake. I mean, it was just so chocolatey, molasses forward, that when we were like, hey, this would be we should, let's try this in the coffee bar form. And it worked out great. I mean, I know I keep repeating that, sorry. But,
it's good to be enthusiastic.
I am also, I've already done 2 cupping tables today, and I ate some of the coffee bar, so I apologize. And it's one of those that we really thought those Típico flavors came out. Those big, bold flavors paired well. You will taste a good amount, you will taste that chocolate in there. Part of it's the coffee, but also the cocoa butter does, it does bring in a little bit of flavor. And the one thing that doesn't come through that's in the coffee, if you were to actually just roast it, is there are some fruit notes in there that definitely don't come through. I get a touch, but it's just not, knowing where the coffee is and where the, when you eat the coffee bar, just 2 very different areas of the fruit level. But it's just a easy, clean on the palate. And it actually, if you haven't eaten it, it ages really well. And that's the same thing with dark chocolate. You can definitely let it sit, and a lot of these sharp notes that you might encounter will start to settle out a little bit. And it just becomes a little more enjoyable. Sometimes it just changes. And we've been enjoying seeing the flavor profiles change in these in the coffee bar as we let it sit on the shelf.
Cool. So Nick, I want to taste the chocolate because I'm sure right now everybody at home has basically ripped it open and eaten it anyway because they couldn't wait. But I'd love to taste it and talk about what we're tasting.
Right. Yeah. So fortunately, I don't have one on me right now. I went to my home office because it's too noisy. But
I'm pretty sure you've memorized it by now, though.
Yeah, once or twice. Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot of vanilla. I'm getting a little bit of like a boozy flavor, but in a very positive way. Now I've had Ryan.
This is like, it's straight up raisins to me. It's very raisiny. Like I'm almost like imagining, like I feel like I'm holding a box of Sun-made raisins, dark raisins.
It reminds me a little bit of Skittles, like those raisin chocolate candy, but in a much more refined way than the kind of commercial chocolate. The thing that I remarked the very first time I had this, Nick, was that chocolate can have a very creamy texture. It can have a little bit of a crunchy or hard texture. Sometimes the texture, of course, is affected by storage conditions. But I've never had chocolate as creamy as this. And I love the texture of this. I feel like the texture of this makes the aftertaste somehow, like there's this merging of texture and aftertaste that makes it so pleasant on the palate after you've eaten it.
Right. And I think part of that comes in from the cocoa butter that we're using. We have a great partner in Ecuador that processes cocoa butter for us, and it is extremely fragrant. I think that's around where you're getting you were mentioning vanilla. And I believe it's when you open this bag, normally when you get cocoa butter, it's kind of it's not the most pleasant smell. Cocoa beans smell great. Cocoa butter can be a little strong. And when we got this batch of cocoa butter in, it was just like, we actually almost wanted to try just eating it, which is, at the end of the day, we do, but it's not like it was something that we were, really happy with. And so we've gone to that exclusively. So in our darks and in this coffee bar, that it just feel like it really adds to the flavor. instead of.
Yep.
A lot of times people will add other flavors into chocolate to kind of mask defects. Vanilla and just different items, just to be able to, if you want a really dark chocolate, you can add sugar or vanilla or different flavors to kind of mask some of these sharp notes. And we just decided, we were just trying to find really high quality ingredients and ones that, can stand on their own, and we match them together. And kind of, honestly, I feel like I tried not to mess up these beautiful master products.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, awesome.
Nick, where can people get more of this?
Yes, thank you.
Where can I, more importantly, where can I get more of this?
Yes. Well, you do have my email, so we can arrange for that for sure. But yeah, we ship from our website at condorchocolates.com. We do ship all over the US. Unfortunately, right now we're not shipping international. I saw, looks like there's several people overseas. Unfortunately, chocolate melts in the summertime, and it takes we just had some bad experiences trying to ship overseas and just getting caught up in customs and this and that, and it was just it was too much of a headache for us. So
no idea what you're talking about.
We had no international issue.
Right. And when you have chocolate truffles and desserts that sit in customs for a month before they get released, it just doesn't. It's just bad. So we unfortunately just kind of stopped that. And so inside of the US, we'd be happy to ship to you. And I'm really glad you guys, hopefully everyone else is enjoying it. And I'm glad, Scott, Ryan, you guys really like it.
It's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. And Nick, thank you for joining us to talk about it too.
No, thank you for having me.
Much appreciated. All right. Well, Ryan, I think
that's it.
I think I'm pretty happy. I feel like, we covered all the things we wanted to cover, and I'm looking forward to people's feedback so that we can just make this better and better each month.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Please feel free to email us at hello@facsimile.coffee. That's FACSIMILE. And again, really excited to cup more coffees with you in April. So stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Bye-bye.